So the beta for Battlefield 2042 has come to an end, and it has resulted in a proper Marmite situation. And if you don't know what Marmite is, basically in the UK there's a substance where people either love it or hate it. So I thought we highlight and talk about some of the issues that people are having with the beta. My current viewpoint is I had a lot of fun with it, but I'm going to wait for the full release to make my mind up. So it was quite clear that it was a beta, there was quite a few bugs, and people were just speculating how close this is to the actual final release version. So just as a caveat, I'm not hating on the game, these are just some of the concerns that people had and identified when playing the beta. Anyway, so one of the first ones that immediately screamed out when people got into the game was the fact that they simply couldn't check the scoreboard. There just wasn't a scoreboard at all. You couldn't tab it up, you couldn't check what was going on. So why this was an issue is you can actually see who was doing better than anyone else on the team. And for those who've been playing the game for a long time, you can actually tell quite a bit from the scoreboard. Be it a tank or a sniper in a strategical position, winding up a lot of kills, you might want to reposition yourself to help alleviate the situation. And the other thing is the reporting mechanics, because with a scoreboard you can actually see if someone is winding up an obscene amount of kills and then go check to see if they're actually cheating behind it. And there's also the fact that you don't actually get to check your personal performance versus everyone else. Now you can check on the team your scores, but you couldn't compare it to the other 64 players. And for me at least, there is something nice to see how you're doing compared to everyone else, and you can also judge your own personal metrics and see how you're improving through things. Now the next thing that people noticed that was missing was another of the movement abilities. So crouch sprint has been removed, meaning you can no longer duck under enemy fire and move at a rapid pace. But more importantly as well is that it seems to be with the introduction of the grapple hook, they've removed all ability for you to kind of jump and grab high spaces with your character. So unless you're playing an assault, you actually have to run around and use all the pathing to get actually onto objects. Now for a game that has put in more players and more emphasis on squads with the UI, they've actually pulled back some of the features as well. So they removed the squad coordination. I couldn't find any ability to actually give any orders, and also they've removed the commanders as well. But one of the things that they removed from Battlefield 1 that I really liked was the fact that you could earn points as your squad if you're doing really well, and then call in bits and pieces as and when you needed them. And I know you've got the whole call in at your tank or support dog or whatever it is, but it doesn't quite have the same edge as Battlefield 5, where you could call in like UAVs and recons and airstrikes, etc. Now the next big chunky one is the whole specialist system. Now a lot of people feel that the whole removal of roles are a terrible thing. So essentially before you had quite clear defined roles, and with those roles came advantages and disadvantages. Now it's a very much a jack of all trades system. Any weaknesses that your class had, you can now just fill it in with a gadget from the menu options. So for example, if you're an assault and you needed to be healed, now what you can do is you can just get a healing box and put it in and no longer need a medic. And this has led to a massive decline on the whole class system, because now no one really plays medic. There's a whole min-maxing system, and there's a whole slew of means out there at the moment of just people calling medic and no one coming along. This was a little bit exacerbated by the fact that the medic had their long-range resurrection removed, and this has been replaced by a pair of paddles that takes about 3 seconds to wind up and just feels no fun to do. Now in terms of maps etc, there's been a lot of complaints about those as well. One, some people say that it's too open, which is down to your own personal speculation, but one thing that was definitely identified was the fact that the destruction has been lowered. So previously, back in the Battlefield, you could actually level a building down to the ground, but you had the ability to build defensive structures and sandbagging and all those good things. That has now been completely removed. Also previously, the maps were designed fairly well and they had their own specific areas for specific types of combat. So you had bunkers where, for example, shotguns were really effective. You might have high cliff ledges where, snipers were really useful. And some people feel that those little details have been removed and now it's a little bit too much of a free-for-all and just a generalization of everything. Additionally, another Marmite feature was the whole special in-map kits, for example. So flamethrowers, if you ever got to play them, or the big heavy armored suits, there appears to be no such thing as that anymore. There's also some general concerns about the UI. Some people say that it's too big and clunky and takes up too much space. Also the fact that they've removed indicators for grenades and medics, etc. And while on the topic of snipers, they've also removed the scope zeroing. Another thing as well that seems to have been removed or isn't really clearly indicated at the moment is hit zones on vehicles. Previously, if you hit a vehicle in a certain area, then it might do damage in a specific way. For example, it might disable the tracks or do more damage because you've hit it in the turret. This hasn't been clearly presented at all, and at the moment it's just giving you flat damage numbers all over the place. Now, one of the comments that I did really like about the fact that now everyone is a mercenary is the fact that you've lost that whole feeling of, and I quote, the spirit of us versus them. And on this front, I really couldn't really agree more. Back in the older versions of Battlefield, where you had the Allies versus the Germans, there was a really clear, distinct difference between the two sides, even if it was down to the voiceovers or just the look and feel of the uniforms. Hell, even the vehicles had their own distinct flavour, which allowed you to really kind of get behind a side and really feel part of the environment. This isn't a thing anymore, and this could be just the fact that it is a beta, but there is just slews of the same character models all over the place, and this has made identifying the enemy really difficult, or just generally made the game feel like you're playing a whole bunch of Animaniacs. Touched on this before, but one of the things I really did miss about the previous Battlefields was the whole fortification system, that you could get out your tool, you could put sandbags, you could bolster the windows and make buildings you're in a little bit stronger against enemy fire. And little things like this, for me personally, made Battlefield different from the other FPS genres out there. Another big irritation for people out there as well is the whole lack of nice animations. For example, if you look at the death animation and you've died with a whole lot of people, you'll find that it actually looks more like a Pilates class than a war scene. And there's other bits and pieces as well. The melee looks awful. Resurrecting someone with the paddles doesn't feel great. Grenade throws feel a little bit off, and don't even talk about the whole fence hopping situation. They've also removed various XPs for working together as a team. There's no spotting XP anymore. There's no assists for drivers. And there's no EXP points given to you for even damaging a vehicle. And the last one that I wanted to talk about is the fact that previously in the games there was always an incentive to be a good leader for your squad. And as previously mentioned, this came through the system of gaining more points for your team and then giving the ability to summon vehicles and cool little perks and, global impact tools. But this seems to have all disappeared. Now, it could just be a case that this is the beta and there are a whole slew of things to come. There, for example, are mines that are still missing, which I'm pretty sure will come along when the full game gets released. And additionally, we haven't even seen the whole weapon tree yet, so we don't know what is out there. We don't even know how the whole progression system works because we were given a very flat set of items to work with during the beta. The last one I would also wanted to talk about, as someone mentioned on Reddit, was the fact that there were no stationary weapons anymore. And these came in various flavors such as big cannons or AA guns or even just mounted machine guns. And these allowed you to defend certain choke areas or even defend key areas of importance. But they just gave you another hill to climb over, another little bit of a dynamic to make the map feel a little bit more unique. For me personally, these are issues that are important and should be identified and should be talked about and resolved. But I did have lots of fun with the beta and I am actually looking forward to seeing what they've done. And once we've seen the full release, we can then make up our minds if there are any outstanding issues or not that need to be resolved. I think one of the things the Battlefield community has done quite well is identify issues that do need addressing, and this is exactly what betas are for. I just hope EA or DICE are out there listening to them. Anyway, I hope you're all well. We're going to be discussing lots of these in the future, but for now, have a great week, everyone, and I'll be back with more news and reviews soon.